Hello, it's me again. This is Lisa Nichols, and today's topic is the lecture. The lecture has been a hot topic of debate in higher education lately, and you may be asking yourself, what's wrong with the lecture? This lecture scene is pretty typical. Examine it closely. What do you notice? Let's take a moment to put lecture in perspective. Our focus should always be on whether or not students are actually learning. How do we make sure that we're not just talking? There are several reasons why lecture doesn't work the way we might like to think it does. Studies show that after 15 minutes, student attention begins to break, with retention decreasing every minute thereafter. In order to increase information retention, professors need to break information into meaningful chunks with structured activities interspersed between. Just like when your computer goes to sleep and you have to jiggle the mouse to wake it up again, according to Mackenzie and White, instructional strategies that involve students actively in lessons contribute to their long-term retention of content. In other words, our students need to do something with the course content in order to increase the likelihood that it will be retained and recalled later when needed. Another problem with lecture is that it is one-dimensional and static. There's no feedback to inform it. Learners are diverse in terms of background knowledge, but most lectures play to the middle. In learner-centered teaching, feedback is two-way and immediate. Faculty use feedback to make decisions on the fly. Should we move forward, skip something, or go back and review? Students gather feedback from the professor as well as from peers to integrate new knowledge, correct misconceptions, and improve performance. Despite the lack of research in favor of straight lecture, moving away from it is still difficult for many of us. This method is entrenched in what we think of when we think about teaching. It has been in use for a very long time. Today we have a few more bells and whistles at our disposal, but overall the lecture hasn't changed much in the 600 plus years since this was painted. As you can see, the professor is in a position of power and authority, delivering knowledge to students who are lined up in rows, facing him, ready to receive his wisdom. And if you look closely at the students, you can see that except for the clothes on their backs, this could be almost any university lecture class you'd observe today. All the typical student behaviors are there. He looks like he's sleeping, bored, lost, doing work for the next class. Oh yeah, making weekend plans. And I love this guy. He probably has a 98% in the class, but he's still looking for that extra credit. And finally, we've all been there. There's no clock on the wall, but I guarantee you this guy knew when it was time to start packing up. So you may be asking yourself, well, if I don't lecture, what do I do for 50 or 60 or 90 minutes? You're not alone. Well, first of all, you might be happy to learn that there will still be some lecturing. It just may not look much like the lecturing you do today. As mentioned earlier, you will need to divide the time you spend with the students into chunks. Some of those chunks will be mini lectures used to highlight the most salient points and to frame the learning activities you've selected to use to teach students the material. In order to make this work, you need to offload factual content, meaning that students are getting it elsewhere through readings, videos, podcasts, whatever, so that your mini lecture chunks contain only the most important, nuanced aspects of your content, the sweet stuff that only you can set up or explain or relate to the bigger picture. Other chunks of class time should be used to give students opportunities to practice what they're learning, to solve problems, discuss ideas, practice tasks, and gather feedback. Active working chunks can be as short as 3 to 5 minutes, or they can be longer, team-based projects. The point is to get students to act upon the information in order to retain it. So your lectures may end up looking a lot more like this. Here are 5 active learning techniques you can use right out of the box to make your class time more interactive and your lectures more participatory. This tried and true technique engages students in small conversations about the topic. Ask or display a question. Have students jot down some of their thoughts in their notes for a minute or two, and then ask them to turn to their neighbor and discuss and debate and defend their ideas. A nice follow-up is to have students add any new ideas to their notes before you continue on with the lecture. Use breaks to teach students to do more than transcribe your lectures. Ask students to listen first and then reflect, review, connect, and summarize what they've learned by listening in their notes. You could have them build on that by giving them time to work in small groups of 3 or 4 to flesh out their notes based on collective memory. Or give them a question or two before your mini lecture and then ask them to listen only while you talk. Then give them time to write down the answer to that question during the break. Really, there are several ways to incorporate reflective note-taking strategies. Anything that requires students to stop, think, and then write and/or discuss will help them take better notes and retain more information. Assign students to groups and have them solve a complicated problem or perform a real-world task in order to learn new material in a hands-on way. Such techniques work best during longer breaks or at the beginning of class. Starting with a problem or a task engages students right away and helps ensure that you don't run out of time, as can often happen when we put lecture first. Sprinkling questions throughout your lecture is another way to keep students on their toes. Turning point, poll everywhere, or if at forms are great ways to get immediate feedback for both you and your students. Just make sure that the questions are challenging enough to keep students paying attention to the mini lectures. Rather than talking until the very last second of class, stop 5 minutes early and ask students to take a couple of minutes to reflect on the day's information, to look over their notes, and to summarize in their own words what they've learned, or what they're still confused about, or to list any questions they might still have. Once they've had a chance to think and write, have them submit that information to an online discussion board or a forum before they leave. This gives you valuable feedback and forces students to reflect on what they do and do not yet understand about the topic. So yes, it's okay to include some lecture, but that does not give anyone license to engage in long, rambling, tangential discussions of minor points. Because a good lecture is organized, relevant, and engaging. A good lecture does not just rehash the textbook. A good lecture does one or more of these 7 things. Remember, if your lecture doesn't do at least one of those 7 things, you're not teaching, you're just talking. And if you need help, call us. We're here to support you. Thanks for your attention. We'll see you soon. Oh, and here are a few follow-up resources you may be interested in reading on your own.